Hey, Nick here, Animal Engineering. Welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to be using the jig I made in the last episode. We'll be separating the subframe jig from the pickup point jig. We're going to get all the suspension and everything back onto the subframes, and then we'll look at getting it under the van. So, it makes sense. If you've seen the last episode, this episode the jig will probably make a lot more sense as to why I've made it the way I've made it. Just notice the front one here, it's got a bit of white paint and stuff. So I had a guy come out and 3D scan that. He's gone away and we'll see how the results of that come back. I was originally planning on just measuring off the table using the grid pattern as a reference to get my measurements and angles and everything. And then it was suggested, and this guy sort of reached out to scan it, which is, I guess in modern days, a far better way of doing it. It does mean that my old brain needs to work out how to use a computer, so I'll be forced into that, which isn't a bad thing. Moving forward on all the rest of the van, once I've got the chassis there, I should be able to design the floor, and be a big learning curve as with everything else on the van. So I'll go ahead now and I'll get everything onto the chassis, and then we'll start looking at getting the body over top of it. Alright, well there you have it. A couple of hours later I've got everything attached to that jig. You sort of see now, having the subframes welded to that top bit, how it was all going together in me old noggin. So now, all I've got to do is I need to get inside the old van here, and it's probably going to require a little bit more bracing in a couple of spots, I believe. I'm just going to chuck some more in before I cut it away, and the little temporary chassis that's been rolling around on for ages, get rid of that. You can see that original crossbeam in there, that's probably going to have to come out. So yeah, we'll get all that cut out, and a bit more bracing in there. Just want to make sure it's not going to do anything funky on me. And then we'll look at dropping it on top of that temporary jig there. Now, one thing I did kind of muck up on my little jigging situation is I had these outriggers here for the shocks to mount up to. Now, they sort of brace along the back there, and that's where the upper control arm is supposed to go. So, kind of mucked that up, but I've just sort of pulled the camber in with a couple of ratchet straps there just to get it straight, which was good enough for what we're doing here. All I'm trying to do is just get it in the van, so I can get some measurements to pull forward of the motor, so where the chassis is going to come forward of the motor, out to the front of the van. Same with the back end, past the rear diff, and obviously in the middle here where it's going to go out to the sides of the van. That's essentially all I'm after here, is just get the van on top so I can pull those measurements out. So once we get the scanning back in, I know from that wheel, go back 50 mil or whatever, and then I've got X amount coming out to the van, and I can sort of get myself a little boundary in the computer of the shell. So, fair bit of work involved just to get a few measurements, but need to make sure it's all nice and square and just as good as it can be before I tackle learning how to use a computer. So we'll get stuck into the van, and we'll cut back once we're sort of dropping it on. Alrighty, well this is what I have come up with. I have the chassis lined up there. You can see got the old forklift going straight through the guts there. It's going to be resting up on the top of the door frame there, but I feel like that should be strong enough. I don't really think it's going to do any damage there. And then around the back, so you've got the two arms of the hoist there, so we're doing a dual lift. So yeah, just got to cut a couple of braces on the inside, and then we'll start lifting her up. Rightio, well that went alright. I've got to say that's one of the moments on the project where the old is going on, but it's little movements. Got her up there, full Egyptian style, with a bit of technology. So now is the time to roll this little temporary jig chassis under and then lower it down, and we'll see if all those measurements and calculations were sort of done on both vehicles a couple of years ago. The theory that this should fit straight under the van. Now is the time to find out. Pretty sure it should be good, but you never know. We will know soon. Alrighty, well, we're looking pretty good, really. All the wheelbase and everything is looking pretty spot on. We've just got these two little bits on the inside. So they're going to clash where the front control arm boxes are, and basically when we build a new chassis, those boxes will be in the same place as they are on this one. So just going to get in there, do a little nip tuck on them, just so we can keep bringing it down. Probably just go cut like a little 45 chamfer off those two little wing pieces in there. And then we should be able to continue dropping her down. Rightio, well, we'll call that a success, I think. That's fitting really, really good. Front track width, you can see. Wheels are in there nicely. Same with the rear. See, front there is nice. Come around this side. Perfect, really. Now, if you look inside, you can see the tyre is hitting the frame there, but we've got a little bit more that we can notch out there on both sides. You just sort of see there's a little bit there that we can notch out. A little bit on that one, but generally speaking, without actually doing any major notching to the frame, that is pretty much as low as it's going to go when it's airbagged out. Obviously at the moment we've got coils in there, so that's at like normal ride height, but once we get the airbags in and we go to do the final actual body on the chassis, we're better airbag them out and then set the body to that chassis eventually. But it's looking good. See the wheelbase, pretty spot on. I say I'm pretty happy that that's all fit in there how I had planned a couple of years ago. See the clearance there for the motor on this cross beam. It's beautiful. Very happy with that result. That could have gone pear-shaped, but it's not. Shows all the research and measuring and stuff pays off eventually. So now that's all under there, we can get in there and we can get our measurements out to the side of the van, and get a bit of a boundary of where the chassis can go. So when we go to the computer, we can plot that all out, which is basically the next bit now. Probably won't really film that, probably cut back once I've actually got a design, and yeah, that'll be in a second, which will more than likely be about 4 weeks or 5 weeks for me, because I've got to learn how to do it. Rightio, well, a little bit of an update. I've got my scans have come through and I'm in my room. Over in the middle of Botswana. So trying to watch a few YouTube tutorials and that sort of stuff, and get my head around this. So the scans are coming through. So you can see here, this is the front subframe. Been through and put a few planes on all the different locations for the sway bar. That's one for the engine mount. So that's the power steering. So I've got a few planes on here. That was for the engine mount. This one here, that's for the power steering, and then yeah, got one for the sway bar mount. One's up here, that's for the shock tower. So I had a bit of a clean up of it. You can see it's not too bad, but go across, that's how it came in. So you can see it's a bit messy, a bit of extra junk there in the scan. So I spent a fair bit of time just going through cleaning all that up. So yeah, working through it. Just gotta watch videos and tutorials and try and hard it out. But some pretty good ones out there, really. I don't think it's gonna be too hard. So we'll keep plodding along and we'll see where we get. Alright, well, a few days later, I've been jamming away on the computer, been watching a lot of tutorials, trying to work out how to do this. And we're getting there, making some pretty good progress now. So I'll spin you around and have a show you what I've done so far. So you can see here, I've got all those little bosses plotted in on the scan. They're all in there, in their little houses. So the scan itself is not the best, but I think it's sufficient enough to do what I want it to do. Turn that one off. So that's all my different little blocks that I've welded into the jig you've seen in the last episode. And then these here, that's just the mounts for the upper control arm there, and then these ones here are for the rear sway bar. So that is the rear one. Spent quite a lot of time just getting it aligned. It was a fair way off. Getting it all aligned and positioned. That's the rear one, the front one. So front one's the same. Got that in there. And that has the little blocks in there as well. And a couple of sketches there of the engine mount and this, what's that one, power steering rack mounts on there. So a bit more work to do on this one as well. And then I need to try and bring them both into one file, and then I can start drawing up the chassis from there. So still the work, heading home very shortly. Just trying to get a bit of a day off and trying to jam away on this, but the old Wi-Fi is down here today, which is fairly common, and unfortunately with this Fusion program you really need internet. So I'm trying to save stuff as I'm going, but I don't really know that it's actually working. So fingers crossed we don't lose everything. I've had to start again through twice, I think now. I've had to basically start from the beginning again, which is annoying, but when you don't know what you're doing, it is what it is. So probably catch back when I'm back home in my shed, and I'll be using the chassis just to go through and double check everything on this scan, measurements and stuff like that before I actually start drawing up all the chassis rails. So we'll see you there. Alright, well, fast forward a few days and I am back in my shed, loving it, and lovely wife's left me a little present in my fridge, which is pretty cool. Stocked her up in my fridge here. Little Star Wars fridge, made that a few years ago now. Actually, made it for a guy and then he bailed out and I got stuck with the bloody thing. See there, beer and water. Yeah, we'll be getting into that over the Christmas break. But I sort of reached a certain point in Botswana in my little donga there, and I got the drawing sort of done to a point, and it looked real funny and it just didn't look right. So I stopped. So I could get home and I've just put the jig back together, got it back together on the table just so I can verify everything, and what I was thinking was correct. So I can't really move anything around because the laptop's freaked out, it's too hot I think, but you can see the difference in height on the computer of this front subframe and the rear one. The rear one just looks way too high, and now I've got this back on the table and re-measuring things. It was correct, it is too high. So in my chicken scratch drawings that I took over there with me to use, I had the engine mount plane 263 mil off the table when in fact it was 363. That's balls up. And then my other reference point was the upper control arm plane, which I was thinking was this one, when in fact I actually measured for this one. So I was out there as well. So I'm definitely glad that I didn't go ahead and just start drawing the chassis based off what I had on the computer. And going through and checking all the bolt hole centres and all that, I think the furthest one's been out off the mesh has been 0.7 of a mil, which really, I mean 0.7's too much, but really it's pretty good. Everything's, a lot of them's been sort of 0.1, 0.3, and by the time you do it with a clearance hole they would have been acceptable-ish. But yeah, good to be back here, verify everything. Now I've know my measurements, I can carry on and start smashing out the design of the chassis. So I'll go inside on the aircon and start doing that. Rightio, well fast forward several days now. I have been just busy on the old laptop there, Fusion, trying to learn and watch tutorials and stuff. I'm starting to get the hang of it actually. I've had to restart it several times, but I think I've kind of got the hang of it now. Well, hang of it enough to do the actual chassis part. So I've got that done, and now I'm just going through, I've got to drop all the tabs to go off to the control arms and all that sort of stuff. I've done the front, that was fairly straightforward, it's just straight off, but I now have to start turning my attention to designing all that. So that's going to be a mission. But I'll sort of show you where I'm at the moment. So you can see here, this is the basic sort of design of chassis I've got so far. So all flowing quite nicely, I feel. Those are the two rails there on the outside of the rear cradle, and now basically all these little billets which are represented on that jig on the table, I now have to project off this main frame to all of these little points. So it's going to be a bit of a mission. So you can see here on the front end, made these little tabs up. So I will refine them a little bit. I'm not super happy with the overall shape of them, but you see that's all the little things in there coming off and projecting out, mounting them up. So yeah, anyway, we are kicking goals, working through it. Should hopefully only be another couple of days playing around. This rear cradle is going to be a lot of work trying to get it to look nice and actually pick everything up and not just look ugly really. So I'll keep kicking on and we'll cut back once it's finished and ready to go to the engineer. Alright, well a bit more time has passed. I've been jamming away on the computer. Also had the old Christmas and New Year's scenario. We actually, for a change, just had a couple of weeks off, chilled out with family and just relaxed really. It did spend still a reasonable amount of time on the computer, not a great deal. Last week we just spent down in Margaret River, so pretty nice little spot down there. Stayed at a big valley, was it Big Tree Valley Caravan Park. That was pretty awesome, just chilled out. And then we were leaving on the Sunday and then ended up leaving a little bit earlier because the engineer was home and he was leaving that night and he just got back the night before. So we left a bit earlier just so I could get to his house. He opened up his house to me, let me come around there just to go over the design and have a look. So he seemed pretty happy with how I was going, so spent another couple of days just fine tuning it a little bit. I've got it finished now. I just need to convert it into a step file, send it off to him, and then he'll do some simulations on the computer and sort of stress test it and do whatever he does. And then hopefully it
should be okay. If not, I think he may make some adjustments to it or get me to make some more minor adjustments to it. But it is looking pretty good. So you can see, been through and done a bit more work just around that diff cradle area. Finish that off a bit. That sort of steps down there, that's where your door walk in is. So yeah, if I can work out how to do it, I'll do a little quick voiceover with a couple of renders that I've done on the computer. So if you're still looking at me now, in a second, it's because I couldn't work out how to do it. So yeah, basically I think we'll leave it there for this episode. Hopefully everything gets signed off and we are good to go. Things are a bit hectic over the next few weeks, unfortunately, with the whole work, life, home balance is heavily the wrong way. But it will mean that I should get hopefully a few months off, just solid, to just crack into this van. And hopefully on the next episode I should have a pallet with all the cut out pieces of the chassis ready to go. So should be able to make some really good progress. Just chassis, floor of the van, and hopefully within that 3-month period maybe get to take it for a drive, which would be pretty awesome. That is my ambition. So that would be maybe June-ish, hopefully, maybe take it for a drive. If I can get it driving by June, I feel pretty confident in actually having it finished this year, which is what I need to do. But anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching if you've made it this far, and we will see you on the next one. Which will be a little bit of a delay. There's been a bit of a delay on this one too, I know. Just waiting for scans and just trying to learn how to use this computer to draw this chassis up. It's taken a while. Never mind. Catch you later.